Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. For those of you at work or driving, this is a compilation of the last 5 malicious compliance videos all in one place, so you don't have to click off to another one. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this, and let's jump right into the first story. Our first story today comes to us from a Maranthine Nightmare. When retail customers feel entitled to extra discounts for no reason, so you give it to them. Let's jump right in. I worked at a pretty popular department store for years, and I have to say that the customers this store breeds are the worst of the worst. This store is probably 90% of the reason that so many customers feel as entitled as they do. The cashier had the hiccups. It was incredibly annoying. Isn't there anything you can do for me? Was an actual honest-to-God complaint one lady had for me when I was a supervisor. So anyway, I was covering a break up at the registers. I was a supervisor at the time and had also already given my 2 weeks notice. I was beyond fed up. It was like spring of my senior year all over again. I had no more F's left. So I'm up at the registers, and this lady who couldn't have been more than 40 comes up with a huge cart full. Anyone who has worked retail, you know this woman. She's got the hair, she's smacking her gums at me while she talks on the phone. The entire transaction is delayed because I need her to pay, and she starts to ignore me because apparently I'm the rude one for interrupting her phone call. She proceeds to tell the person on the other end, "Give me a second," and finally turns to me and says, as if I'm an impatient child testing her last bit of patience, "Yes. Here's your total, ma'am. Do you have any coupons or rewards to use today?" She nodded, and here is when she drops a few clippings on the counter in front of me, ignoring my outstretched hand, and turns her attention back to her phone. As soon as I look at the coupons, I see that none of them are usable. She has one that is $10 off your menswear purchase of $50 or more. She has all women's clothing. The next coupon expired 2 months ago. Another one doesn't start for another week, etc., etc. So I try again to get her attention. She's just as lovely and accommodating as the last time. She rolls her eyes, tells the person on the phone that she will have to call them back, and gives me another sharp "Yes." "Sorry, ma'am, this coupon is expired, this one hasn't started, and this one is only for when you purchase $50 worth of menswear. Do you have any other coupons or rewards?" She stares at me like I had just called her mother some unsavory name. Excuse me, what? What could I do but shrug helplessly? "You have got to be kidding me. This is the entire reason I came out here today, to use those coupons. I really can't use them? Unbelievable. Some customer service here." All the while she's packing her useless coupons back into her purse and glaring scorch marks into my head. Remember I said I was done? My patience before Shopzilla here was already at 0. She tipped the scales. I was officially in the negatives. I had negative F's and negative patience left. So when she said, "You should be ashamed of yourself being so rude to a customer," something in me snapped. I smiled sweetly at her, mustered up a bright and cheery expression that I usually reserve as my waitress face, and said, "I'm so sorry you feel that way, ma'am. But on the bright side, since it's Tuesday, I can still apply your senior's discount, so at least you aren't losing that one, right?" I can't quite describe her expression. I think she was angry, but I think she was more shocked. And in that state of shock, she sputtered out, "I'm not a senior." I mimicked her shock, trying to appear horrified by my accidental faux pas, and then immediately said, "Let me take that off of there for you then," and promptly took the senior discount off, bumping her total up another $20. "I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding, ma'am." Oh boy, she was pissed. But like I said, I think she was more shocked. She seemed a little dumbfounded. She paid, she took her stuff, she left. I will take that petty moment of satisfaction at her horrified expression to my grave. It was even worth the write-up that I did end up getting after she called the store and gave my manager a piece of her mind. It came out in the comment section down below that OP worked for Kohl's, and there's so many other people in there that worked for Kohl's as well or currently work for them, and the horror stories are absolutely crazy. It seems like a little bit of a crap show of a company, but I'm not going to say too much because, you know, I don't like being sued. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Ding Dong Dee Long Wong. Everybody must know when I am out of office. Let's jump right in. So yeah, a couple of years ago, I was working for an IT company, which also provided server management and general domain and email services. We had some really big companies as clients, so we were used to some really idiotic demands, but most of the time we could convince the people whose main job seemingly was to be in charge to listen to our expertise. Not so Mr. Bigwig. Mr. Bigwig was the CEO of a large automobile sales company. He also was the type of guy who prided himself with being a great negotiator and thinking so far ahead regular people can't follow. And he was a complete butt to everyone. Mr. Bigwig went on a holiday once and set up an automatic out-of-office reply in his mail account, but as is the technical standard, everyone who wrote him during that time only received the reply just one single time. When Mr. Bigwig returned from his vacation, this infuriated him a lot, so he called our support line and yelled and cussed his way up our hierarchy until he had me on the phone. I tried to tell him that this was working as intended and tried to explain why, but Mr. Bigwig wouldn't have any of it. This went all the way to our CTO, who sent him a waiver to sign, stating that we would deactivate this limitation but not be liable for any consequences, in short. Then he told me to make the changes to Mr. Bigwig's account. I tried to object, but the CTO just smiled, shrugged, and went into his office. Mr. Bigwig was happy. He won and booked this as his latest negotiating victory. Now, let us jump to December the 29th of the same year. I get a phone call from Mr. Bigwig. He is not happy. He is not happy because he is blacklisted on about every blacklist in existence. He is also not happy because he can't receive or send any email. And he is not happy because he can't find any mail he received during the Christmas holidays or near them. He can't find them because the nice number in brackets beside his inbox folder that indicates the amount of unread mails he has reads 50,000. A quick look around the server logs tells me there are indeed some mails he did not receive. 150,000 to be exact. They are still pending delivery because his inbox is full. He is also not happy because he is the laughingstock of everybody he ever respected. Now, let me guide you as the reader to the bottom of this. What you don't know, and what we also did not know at the time, is Mr. Bigwig was a member of a very exclusive group of business owners, CEOs, and high-ranking politicians around the globe. The kind of people you would imagine sitting around a large oak table, smoking cigars, drinking 200-euro whiskey, and discussing world dominance. This group had a mailing list, a crappy, basic mailing list. It went something like this. Bigwig, out of office reply, "Hey, thank you for your mail, but I am on holiday, I will reply later." Some random dude at mailing list, "Merry Christmas." Mailing list at everybody, "Hey guys, some random dude is wishing you Merry Christmas." Bigwig at mailing list, "Thanks for telling me, but I am on holiday, I will reply later." Mailing list at everybody, "Hey guys, Mr. Bigwig is on holiday, he will reply later." Bigwig at mailing list, "Thanks for telling me, but I am on holiday, I will reply later." Mailing list at effing everybody, "Hey guys, Mr. Bigwig is on holiday, he will reply later." Bigwig at mailing list, "Thanks for telling me, but I am on holiday, I will reply later." Mailing list at effing everybody, "Hey guys, Mr. Bigwig is on holiday, he will reply later." Bigwig at mailing list, "Thanks for telling me, but I am on holiday, I will reply later." Mailing list at effing everybody, "Hey guys, Mr. Bigwig is on holiday, he will reply later." Repeat until the servers give out. So B. Diddy was not the only one who had thousands and thousands of mails in his folder. All his fancy pants networking contacts had too. Mr. Bigwig raged hard at everyone who was brave enough to get on the phone with him, threatened to sue us for millions of euros, and to end us as a business. We finally put him through to our founder, who listened to his rant and told him he would send him a solution within the next 10 minutes. He sent 2 documents: a scan of the signed waiver in which the consequences of disabling the out-of-office message restriction were outlined in detail, and a service contract, allowing us to fix the problem to our abilities without any financial budget limitations, but with a really nice, red, enormous estimated budget. It was a good year for the company, with an unexpected spike in revenue just before New Year's Eve. Ah yes, Big Man is a giant douche canoe and wants things done his way. We give him exactly what he wants, and now he realizes how much of an idiot he is and wants it turned back. Okay, well, maybe he didn't realize how much of an idiot he was, but he definitely wants it turned back, and at least he looks like an idiot to everyone else. Our next story today comes to us from Taudo Crone. Boss is going to keep asking me to work shifts when I take time off? How about I take a permanent vacation? Let's jump right in. This is the story of my former employer. I work in the Northeast US, and my employer at the time was a very small company, boss and 5 employees, in a very specific industry where 90% of our work was on construction sites, and finding a well-qualified person in this very specific industry is a very, very hard thing to do. My boss was the kind of boss that every employee hates. Corners were cut every possible way in order to keep overhead costs down. On top of that, he would constantly overbook on jobs, like signing contracts for 6 projects during the same week, knowing full well that he only has 5 employees, which would result in the employees often working 14-hour days or more, which really sucks when you're on a salary, no overtime. His worst attribute by far was approving time off, and then, during your time off, calling or texting you, asking if you would be willing to work a day or cut your vacation short. Sometimes, he'd even ask you to move your time off to the next week or next month when the workload lightens up. Hint, it never lightened up due to his constant overbooking. After working at this company for 6 years, I got used to all the aforementioned annoyances. But then, things changed. My son was born. In the months leading up to his birth, I made it very clear that I would be taking a 5-week unpaid leave of absence once he arrives. The state we're in allows new parents to take up to 8 weeks of unpaid leave. I told my boss that I know 8 weeks would be a huge strain on such a small company, so I was willing to take 5 weeks, but those 5 weeks would be completely off the grid, meaning don't call me, don't text me. If you're going to ask me to do anything work-related, the answer will be no, so don't bother. I'm going to be spending time with my family. He 100% agreed. Fast forward to my son's birth. He was born on a Friday, and after a short stay in the NICU, don't worry, he's fine, was released on Monday, and we took him home. Tuesday morning, yeah, the next day, I wake up to a missed call, an email, and 3 texts, all from my boss asking me to call him back ASAP. For reasons still unknown to me to this day, I call him back, and he tells me there's a slight emergency, code speak for he screwed up the scheduling and has a job with no employee at it, and asks if I could maybe come into work that day and maybe work a couple more days that week until he finds someone to cover it. I lost it. I literally felt something in my neck snap and unleashed a verbal assault on him that I still feel bad about now, a year later. I ended my rant with an apology. As much of a dick move as it was for him to be calling me in that situation, it was still completely unprofessional of me to say what I said to him. Obviously, he wasn't a big fan of what I said, and after a small rant of his own, ended with the sentences that made this whole story possible. He said, "You've got a pretty good gig at this company that most people your age would be thankful for. I'd be impressed if you could find a better job in this field because I've been doing this for 30 years and I know how small this industry is. Trust me, good jobs like yours don't come along very often. Think about that." So we ended the call and I did what he said. I thought about it. After thinking about it for 30 seconds, I got out of bed, sat down in front of my computer, and started looking at job postings. 5 weeks later, my time off came to an end, and my first day back, I came into work, walked into my boss's office, and handed him a piece of paper. "What's this? I thought about what you said about how you'd be really impressed if I could find a better job than the one I have here, so I did." My boss reads over what I handed him, a job offer from a competitor for the exact same job I was performing, but at a 25% higher salary, an extra week of paid vacation compared to what I had, and a stipulation that company policy was that work hours are capped at 8 per day, meaning that once I hit 8 hours on a job, I pack it up and leave until tomorrow, no exceptions. Well then, can I have the day to crunch some numbers to come up with a counteroffer? No, don't bother. I just wanted you to see it because I know you wouldn't have believed me otherwise. Gave my 2 weeks notice and left for whatever job site I was on that day. That was a year ago, and I could not be happier with my new job. I get to spend lots of time with my boy, and that's the best job perk there is. For all you bosses and managers out there, don't F with your employees, especially the good ones. Treat them how you'd want to be treated. Most employees don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses. There was an interesting comment down below this one from somebody who said they had a contract with their company that said if somebody called them and tried to get them to work on a scheduled day off, they were to be paid for 8 hours that day and still keep their day off. That's pretty crazy, and I think we should all try to work that into our contracts. Our last story today comes to us from Evil Hound. You want a meeting to discuss our phone account? Okay, let's have a meeting. Let's jump right in. I'm not sure if this belongs in petty revenge or malicious compliance, for there's a little of both. So sorry if this has been put in the wrong place. Either way, I've enjoyed my malicious revenge compliance, so I hope you do. For the past few years, our business has been receiving telemarketing calls from an offshore call center trying to make appointments for Optus Business Center. Every time they call, we'd politely tell them we were not interested and to remove us from their list, and they'd promise not to call again. You can probably tell by my use of the words every time that having ourselves removed from the list didn't work. It didn't work the first time, and it didn't work the 50th time. Offshore are cheap and get paid per appointment, so they would get quite aggressive. It was clear that a new strategy needed to be found, as it was taking too long to get them to bugger off. So began my campaign of malicious compliance and petty revenge. Hi, we're calling from Optus Business Center, and we can save you 40% on your mobile phone bill. Can we come and see you tomorrow at 11 a.m.? You can save me 40% of my mobile bill? That's like 60 grand a month. What? How many phones do you have? 150 or so that I'm responsible for directly, plus a few others. The appointment is quickly confirmed. The next day a salesman calls me up, he's running early. Can we meet earlier? I refused. Our appointment is for 11 a.m. after all. 11 a.m. rolls around and in he walks. We sit down in reception and go through the greetings. I then ask him if it's possible to make the telemarketing calls stop now. He assures me that it is, and so I stand up, shake his hand, and thank him for coming in. Wait, that's it? You could have said that over the phone. I point out that we did many times, and it didn't work, and I hope that this waste of his time, 45-minute trip from Homebush to Sydney, would perhaps teach him to mend his ways. Over the past 2 years, they have sent out 5 different reps to see us. They call for meetings, we accept them, shine them on about the value of the account, and they roll in to be greeted by me dressed in a chicken suit, made to wait in our meeting room for 20 minutes before being asked to remove from the list, then being turned away at the door. They send 2 reps that time. I'm posting this today because it was visit number 6 and it was the best yet. We got a repeat customer. I sat him down in the meeting room and played the video recording of our last meeting. Is that you? Yes, it's me. Didn't I follow up? Didn't we have a good meeting? I point out that I certainly enjoyed our last meeting and zoom forward in the video to the part where I explained that we didn't have 500 mobile accounts and he needed to please remove us from their list, and you could see his heart break, which it did again once he realized that whatever account he thought was being discussed today was not going to be discussed, which we also have on video so we can go all Inception if and when he shows his face again. Does anyone else think they should be taking this just a little bit further? Like steak and beers, maybe? That would probably work. Just tell them, hey, I'm perfectly willing to listen to your pitch, but you're gonna make it worth my while, so take me out for dinner. Someplace expensive, please. Our next story today comes to us from Malformed Data. Tell me to appeal my unfair grade? You got it. Let's jump right in. Many years ago, it's a joke, leave me alone, I was a student studying computer science in the Midwest. While most of my professors were okay, there was one that was notorious. Let's call him Dr. J. Dr. J was an old, effete, lazy professor with a thick Southeast Asian accent whom had been teaching for the better part of 30 years and had fully embraced the typical semi-retired lifestyle of the tenured professor. Showing up to office hours? Maybe. Showing up to help in a lab? Once the whole semester. I estimated out of the 3.5 hours per week of lecture time, he was actually in the classroom for maybe half of it, and the time that he did spend in the classroom was a complete waste. He would just pass out packets at the beginning of class that contained numerous diagrams and handwritten notes that were indecipherable and meander around the class, pointing at various parts to groups of people working on them and mumble incoherently about how to solve it, I think. I never understood a word he said. He never followed his course syllabus or even answered emails. For anyone who's taken an engineering course, especially an upper-level one, this won't sound too crazy, but here's the kicker: he would fail regularly half the class for a required upper-level computer architecture course. This is exceptionally rare and completely unfair for a class at this level, especially at a state school that isn't a research university. Typically, the interlopers have been weeded out by junior year, so while the rest of the classes are by no means a cakewalk, if you put forth an honest effort to learn the material, you should be able to pass the class with flying colors. Not so with Dr. J. Failing a class at the level of this course could be devastating to your degree path, since it was a required course. Dr. J was the only one to teach it, and it was only taught in the fall. But Dr. J couldn't be bothered, despite the class average for his exams being something like 2 of 15. Not that scores mattered, because you could get the same score as someone on all the assignments and exams, but you'd fail the class for who the F knows why. Here's the malicious compliance. Lo and behold, I'm one of the 16 out of 31 students in the class that he failed that semester, and I failed having gotten very similar scores to a couple other students, but they passed. I went to Dr. J's office after the scores had been applied to our transcripts online to discuss the matter. Dr. J wouldn't have any of it. Doesn't matter that I had similar scores to other students that had passed. There's many ways I grade my students and you failed. If you don't like it, you're free to appeal the grade, but you won't get it. The fact that the little crap was sitting there in his chair trying to BS me pissed me off so damn much, I decided right then and there to F his crap up. My school has a very well laid out and reasonable grade appeal policy with many avenues towards getting the appeal approved. I knew that through some of the snide jokes they made, my other professors did not take kindly to Dr. J at all, so it wasn't just the students that strongly disliked him. Well, when you appeal a grade, the other professors in the department are the ones who get to decide whether or not you actually passed, given certain evidence. It's practically criminal what he gets away with, were the words of my faculty advisor. Now, my original plan was for me to just file an appeal and move on, because I knew I'd get it. But Dr. J had poked the bear and now I was mad. So I reached out to everyone in the class, very easy since we are all on a Slack channel together, and set a meeting in a conference room in the library. I guess I underestimated how much everyone hated Dr. J because everyone from the class showed up. I laid out my plan, everyone filed a grade appeal, even if you passed, if it'll help your GPA. At my school, a grade appeal will replace your letter grade with a satisfactory, which means you get credit for the course without a grade that affects your GPA. I had enough appeal forms pre-printed before the meeting so that everyone could fill it out together. It was the happiest I'd ever seen that group of people the entire semester. I think the final count of appeals was something like 22. Everyone whose GPA could be improved with a satisfactory applied for one. You should have seen the look on the department chair's face when we showed up with a stack of appeals. No department in the history of the school had ever had that many appeals or complaints for a single course, let alone for a single professor. I know this because the dean sat us all down and said so. There were so many appeals, they had to bring us into the faculty panel in groups of 3 to 4. Not that it mattered, the whole thing was a formality as the die was cast. 2 weeks later, we heard the news. Everyone, literally everyone, had gotten their appeal approved. Dr. J was given a formal warning by the uni and had most of his courses taken away and are now taught by other people. He still holds on to the computer architecture course and some freshman intro classes, but from what I've heard, he hasn't failed anyone for a long time. So if you're a lazy prick of a professor, be warned, you might get someone like me for a student who foments an insurrection in your class and turns your job upside down. Now, why would a teacher fail half their class intentionally? Doesn't that make it look like they're not treating that class effectively if half of their class isn't even making it through? I don't quite get that. Now, if this guy had so much experience and tenure there that they just didn't look into it, well then that says a lot more about the school system than anything else. Our next story today comes to us from Rabid Rathian. You can't call in sick this early. You can't call in sick this late. You have to come to work. You shouldn't have come to work. Let's jump right in. Background: I suffer from migraines, and unfortunately when I get one, they tend to last 3 to 4 days, leaving me completely incapacitated and unable to do anything more than lie in my bed in a dark room and cry and vomit. This means that when I get one, I basically know straight away that I'm not going to be doing anything for the next few days. I have a casual retail job in addition to other work which I've had for almost 20 years across different stores. I was always the one who worked extra hard and stepped up to do extra shifts or stay back when someone else couldn't come in. But the department manager we had at the time of this story was a narcissist who got off on bullying staff, but really disliked me because I stood up for myself. The funniest part was that she loved to try to stand over people to intimidate them, but with me it failed miserably because I was about a half foot taller than her. About 15 years ago, I started to get a migraine in the middle of the day before I was meant to have a shift starting at 5 p.m. Knowing I wouldn't be able to work the following day, I called the manager to let her know I wouldn't be able to come in, thinking it would give her plenty of notice to find a replacement. Her response: "You can't call in sick the day before your shift. You don't know that you'll still be sick tomorrow. If you're really sick tomorrow, then you can call in." Okay, fine. Went to bed dosed up on prescription painkillers, woke up at 10 a.m. still feeling like a railroad spike had been driven through my eye socket. So I called up again. The manager: "Your shift doesn't start for another 7 hours. You're just trying to get out of work. You'll probably be fine by 5 o'clock, so I'm not going to replace you yet." Alright, went back to bed and was so wiped I didn't wake up till about 3:30. We were supposed to give 2 hours notice, so by this point it was half an hour too late. Or it would have been if I hadn't already given notice twice previously. Anyway, I was still in no shape to even get to work, let alone work, so I rang up for a third time and asked to speak to the department manager again. She was not happy. "You've only given me an hour and a half notice. That's not enough. You better show up to work. I've told you twice over the last 2 days that I wouldn't be able to come in." At this point, I literally had to stop and be sick. "I can't come in. You've known that since yesterday. If you're not at work by 5 p.m., I'm gonna make sure you don't get any extra shifts." This was when I decided to be maliciously compliant, though I hadn't heard of that term back then. I asked my mother to drive me to work. She asked if I was really that spiteful I'd go into work sick just to make a point. And, well, yes. Yes, I am that spiteful. Clocked in and then went and sat in the fitting room under the bench instead of doing what I was supposed to be doing. My colleagues were horrified, asking what the heck was I doing there in that condition, and I told them that I'd tried calling in sick, but manager had threatened to stop giving me shifts if I didn't show up. Those colleagues were great. One brought me a glass of water, and another let me borrow her sunglasses so I could try to cut out some of the bright shop lights. After about half an hour, the manager came in, saw that I wasn't doing any work, and bent down so she could scream in my face. And I leaned forward and threw up all over her shoes. At this point, I could have held it in until I was able to get a cleaning bucket out of the cupboard, but I decided to just let her have it instead. She went absolutely nuclear and started screaming even harder. "Why would you come to work like this? You should have stayed home." And I was feeling so sick and miserable, and her screeching was reverberating in my head and making the pain worse. So I started crying and ended up being sick again all over the floor. As she stormed off, my colleagues called the store manager over, who was immediately horrified that I was at work in that condition, and called my mother to come and collect me and said that manager would be sternly talked to. Luckily, she was in hiding somewhere when my mother arrived, or she would have ripped her a new one. Because managers and HR will always look out for each other, no matter how crappy they are, the department manager didn't face any real consequences as far as I know. But after that, she pretty much pretended I didn't exist, which suited me right down to the ground. And not long afterwards, I was able to transfer to another store, so I didn't have to put up with her constantly throwing her toys out of the pram anymore. I can't say I've ever experienced a migraine myself, so I can't imagine what it feels like, but knowing that my wife gets them and how debilitating they are to her, I can sympathize with OP in this story just a little bit. The icing on the cake in this story is definitely the puking on the manager's shoes. However, you should have aimed up a little bit, gotten some on the pants, maybe on the shirt as well. You know, enough that they would be incredibly uncomfortable or even have to go home to change. Maybe next time. Our next story today comes to us from Lord Dunkles. Manager wants me to come in sick. Let's jump right in. So I have been sick for the past few days. I have a fairly intensive cold that has left me with little sleep and some difficulties breathing when laying down. I figured I should get a doctor's note, so I went to urgent care. Minute Clinic wasn't taking walk-ins due to COVID traffic. The doctor says I have a viral infection in my upper sinuses and upper respiratory regions. Note the lack of specific diagnosis because it comes into play later. I work as a delivery driver at a chain pizza place, which means I frequently handle food and could be a danger to customers if contagious. I send a text to my GM, general manager, and he says, "Don't worry about it, you deserve a few extra days off anyways." I feel at this point that I can rest easy for a few days until I feel better, but in comes my district manager, who wants to know when I will be able to come back into work. My doctor's note doesn't give a date by which I must come back in and just says, "until symptoms have passed." So I tell her I don't know. She says that she will be taking me off the schedule for next week and that I should call her to let her know when I can work again. I tell her that I will and I go back to sleep. District manager calls again later that night, informing me that she has in fact changed her mind and is putting me back on the schedule. My sinuses are feeling a little better, but my sore throat and cough have gotten much worse, so I still feel that it would be irresponsible of me to go be a contagion at a restaurant. She must have been doing the schedule because she informs me that if I do not come in, that she will have to cover my shifts for the week, and that we were delivering in the cold rain last night, so we probably are going to get colds anyway. She says that since my note doesn't have a specific diagnosis on it, that it's not a big deal if I come in anyways. Now, I would almost feel bad for her having to cover my shift if it weren't for the fact that she was the one responsible for driving away all our employees by being such an insufferable butt in the middle of a jobs market where every employer is desperate for workers. Cue malicious compliance. I decide that if she is going to try and make this my problem instead of hers, that I'm going to make it as much her problem as humanly possible. I stop taking all my cough medicines and down a few sodas so that the acidic drink can ravage my larynx. I go to sleep that night, coughing up a lung and a half, barely able to shut my eyes. I get up the next morning and receive a call from district manager checking to make sure I'm coming in today. I told her in my now hoarse, rattly voice that I could come in today, but that I would need her to give me a written, signed notice stating that she was ordering me to ignore my doctor's note saying that I was unfit to work. To my surprise, she agreed. My plan wasn't actually legal action, but rather to have both that note and a doctor's on hand while on deliveries. When customers would ask the obviously sick, hacking, coughing delivery girl if she was alright, I would simply tell them no, and I have a doctor's note saying as much as well. But I also have this note from my manager saying to disregard the doctor's note and that I am fit to handle your food. As our store didn't require masks for vaccinated employees, nobody but me was wearing a mask that day when I walked in with my doctor's note and inhaler. I guess district manager must have either wisped up or talked to her higher-ups because she was singing a very different tune when I walked in the door. No longer is it, "Come in because I will have to cover your shifts if you don't." Instead it was, "Oh, I just needed you to come in so I could ensure you had a doctor's note." I had already sent an image of it to the general manager. "You don't have to stay today. You should go home and get some rest." I, of course, reminded her that she would have to cover my shifts, to which she was now saying she didn't mind, and that I should drink some warm tea and honey for the nasty cough I was sporting. So here I am at home now in my bed, writing this all down before I sleep and forget all the details. If you've ever made a statement to someone, and that someone has said right back to you, "Hey, can I get that in writing?" you need to stop for a second, sit back and go, "What the F did I just say?" Because obviously, if they want it in writing, they want to use it against me. Our next story today comes to us from Frederick. "I did all the work." Let's jump right in. This is my first time posting. This happened 20 plus years ago. I'm not sure why that matters, but I see it in many of these posts. I worked for the family business repiping mobile homes. Because I wasn't married and didn't have kids, my buddy and I were the out-of-town crew. We traveled all over the state. A typical week would consist of 10 houses over 5 days, 2 a day, Monday to Friday. That was the requirement. 10 houses must be plumbed a week, no exceptions. We had a backlog of work. After my buddy got good, we could easily plumb 2 houses in 6 to 7 hours. The other crews typically took 10 hours for 2 houses. Since we were paid by the house, it didn't matter how fast or slow you were, so as long as you did 10 houses a week. I've always hated working 5 days a week, so we decided each Monday morning to look at our work orders and rearrange the schedule, so we did 2 houses Monday, travel time getting to the first job, 3 on Tuesday and Wednesday, then 2 on Thursday, leaving us all day Friday to sleep in, explore whatever town we were in, and enjoy a 3-day weekend. This went on for some time, until my girlfriend wanted to go out of town for a 3-day weekend. So we finished on Thursday, drive to the shop, dropped off my van, and left for the weekend. Friday afternoon, I get a call. It's the boss. "Where are you?" "New York." Obviously confused. "New York? What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm currently in New York City. What's up?" Lots of confused questions and snarky answers back and forth. "Why did you cancel your Friday jobs? Is something wrong with your van? It's at the shop." I didn't cancel any jobs. Now more confused by how I did 10 jobs in 4 days than how I was in New York without their knowledge. "How did you do 10 jobs in 4 days? I decided it would be easiest to tell them that I've been doing this for a while. Pissed. Absolute fury that I'd been claiming my per diem and hotel while not working Fridays. Sunday night turns into a lecture of how I should be doing more for the business. I remind them we're the only crew that goes out of town. I'm told from here on out, I'm doing 13 jobs a week. I ask if the other crews will be expected to do the same, considering they all work locally. Nope, just me. So I plan the compliance. I tell my cousin to schedule our next week in the city furthest away, about a 5-hour drive. We were normally only scheduled 9 jobs for that city, as the first day drive took up so much time. No need to remind anyone of that, the number is 13 this week. So we head out Monday, no changes, no tweaks, just do what's scheduled. Obviously, we can't do 2 on Monday. Half our day was spent driving. It didn't help that we weren't exactly rushing. So around 4, we call the office and tell them to call the customer. We won't be able to get to them. The customer is furious and asks when they'll get rescheduled. No idea. Fast forward to Thursday, while finishing job 10, we call the office and inform them that we're out of material. No pipe, no fittings, no wholesale house to go to, nothing. Please tell the boss to bring us more. I get a call from the boss. What happened? The van can only hold 10 jobs worth of material. That's the way you set it up. Can't you get to X and get more pipe? That's 2 hours away each way. We'll have to cancel another job. Plus, they charge double what we pay in town. Why didn't you say you couldn't do 13 jobs? I did. You said I was being lazy. I thought you meant you didn't want to do 13 jobs, not that the truck couldn't hold enough material. I didn't want to do 13, and you set the trucks up. It's your truck. I'll meet you at your first job at 7 a.m. With a smile you can hear over the phone, see you in the morning, boss. An exhausted boss drops off pipe and fittings at 7. Hey, did you want to help me knock out the Monday job we canceled, or do you want us to stay another night? Hotel, per diem. We went back to 10 jobs a week after that. So many of these malicious compliance posts involve a boss that has no idea how their own company runs. How can you manage something if you don't know how to do it yourself? It just baffles me. Our next story today comes to us from Queso Scaria. I certainly don't want to harass a customer. Let's jump right in. So finally I have a story to post here. I work in health IT. Specifically, I assist people with getting into various patient portals to access their health information, make appointments, message doctors, etc. 95% of the people who call us are nice and often grateful when we're able to help them get back into their portal. Some start as frustrated, but once they see we're able to help them and get them what they need, they transform and become sweet as pudding pie. Then there's the other 5%. Oh boy. A note here that the company I work for is excellent. They put an emphasis on customer service first, but also have our back if there are any genuine issues with the customer misbehaving. Everything is recorded, so if there are any questions, quality assurance or management can go back, hear for themselves, and make recommendations as needed. All this leads to our caller for today. Mr. Douche was having problems getting into his portal. He calls me, literally yelling about how broken and garbage your system is, with a tone implying I personally picked the EHR and portal for a medical organization in another state just to spite him. Hey, no hurt feelings here. There are some things I don't like about the portal either, but he continues on and on about how much he hates it, all his friends hate it, and his neighbors hate it, his pets hate it, and so on. When I can finally get a polite word in, I ask him for his name so I can look him up in our system. He spits out his name, Bob Douche. Per HIPAA, I also have to ask for 2 secondary identifiers to make sure he is the right Bob Douche. I asked for his date of birth and the last 4 of his social security number per procedure. He rants about why I can't get him back into his chart now and screeches out the rest of his info. I try to find him in the system as he continues babbling angrily, and lo and behold, he's not in there. I politely ask him to spell his name. Geez, don't you know how to do your job? Turns out his name is not spelled like the normal douche. It's spelled something like douche. I finally find him and open his file. So you can't get into the portal, sir? Yes, didn't I just say that? Okay, sir, I see your username is douchenozzle86. I can't look up old passwords, so would you like me to give you a temporary one? Screaming intensifies. I'm already in my portal, he cries in fury, completely contradicting what he said mere seconds ago. I need help finding my information. I am now holding my headset away from my ear in pain. If my cubicle neighbor had not been at lunch, I'm pretty sure he'd be able to hear this guy just as clearly as me. I'm sorry, sir. I thought you just said, don't you even know what you're doing? Well, sir, what are you? Why do you keep asking me these questions? You're harassing me. Oh, well now. I can't be harassing my customers. That's just not appropriate and against our company's policies, of course. Deep breath, clear voice. Well, sir, I'm trying to assist you, but if you feel I'm harassing you, then I'm afraid I need to end this call. The screaming had become intelligible at this point, though I heard a couple of curses thrown in. Remember how I said our company has our back? If abusive language is used, we're allowed to disconnect after a warning, and I had already told him I was going to end this call. I'm sorry I wasn't able to help you, sir. Thank you for calling Patient Portal. Have a good day. Push end call. Per procedure, I immediately notified quality assurance of what had just happened in case the guy called back with complaints or started bellowing at other agents. QA listens to the call and comes back with, wow, that guy started angry and he never let up. You tried to help and you had more patience than I would have. You're fine. I went on to help many other lovely customers through the rest of the day. He, thankfully, never called back. I would not be surprised to find he filled himself with so much rage he spontaneously combusted, leaving a vacuum of bitterness behind in his place. Ah yes, spontaneous combustion, because he really did make an ash of himself. I've got to be honest, most of the time when you're talking to a customer service agent, if you treat them with a little bit of respect, they're going to help you out and get what you want done. These people are at work, and I guarantee you 99% of those people listening to this right now have worked a job sometime in their life too. Did you enjoy it when people came in screaming at you? Didn't think so. No reason to do that to customer service either. Our next story today comes to us from Magnus40. HR didn't want to have an awkward conversation with a couple of people, so we all get extra days off. Let's jump right in. The company I worked for had a quite old-fashioned attitude to the workplace. The workforce was divided into boiler suits and suits, or workshops and office. They regarded office as educated, professional and honest, and workshop as stupid, half-butt, and petty thieves. This was not a view I agreed with. I had come from a company where everyone from janitor to general manager were treated the same and could have an input. If something went wrong in design or manufacturing, it was often the guy working the machine or fitting the parts who spotted it and came up with the correction. In my new place, the office would not accept input from workshop unless they really had to. Workshop had to clock and account for every minute, whereas office were on the honor system. We were trusted to input our own hours, and we usually just entered our 8 hours per day, despite usually working more, sometimes a lot more, because we were professional in our work ethic. In my old place, everyone clocked. It was no big deal, but suggesting that it happened here was like suggesting that office workers were untrustworthy. Then there was Bob. Bob turned up about 8:30 and left about 3:30, and somehow still managed to log 8 hours per day. We had a half-hour lunch break. We could extend it but had to log it and work the time back. He took long lunches of about an hour or so. He was also a heavy smoker, and about 3 to 4 times an hour, Bob would pop outside for a smoke. Everyone knew about Bob, including HR. We knew that Bob was on a shaky peg for a while because his working hours were getting shorter and shorter while still being charged at 8 hours. Something had to give. HR had an easy job. Have a word with Bob and get him to work the hours he claimed, put him on an RA, remedial action plan, or else fire him for his misaccounting hours. Instead, HR decided to instigate a new policy that everyone on site would clock and would have to account for their hours on site. At no point did HR actually talk to anyone in the office. They just seemed to come up with this plan based on what they think went on. Engineering were generally happy with this, although a few did grumble about honor and trust. HR just shrugged their shoulders and shifted the blame onto the European Working Time Directive and said that it was the new normal, nothing we can do, honest. You don't BS engineers, because we like rules, and sure enough, some of the engineering team researched it and found out that HR were just using EU law to railroad through a new process. We did need to record worked hours, but nowhere did it say we had to use an electronic clocking system to do it. The old system fulfilled the requirement of the law just fine. The new clocking machines were fitted in every entrance to the office block. We were all given swipe cards and training on using the new system. We could have pointed it out to HR, and indeed some people tried, but the decision had already been made, and they pushed ahead with it. We all knew what was coming, and we continued on as normal, waiting for the end of the month. At the end of the month, the project billing controllers went nuts. While 1 or 2 people were genuinely stealing time from the company, the rest of us were under-accounting for our time. Engineering were on a flexible working day. As long as we did core hours and did our 8 hours, then we were okay. Anything over 8 hours was banked, and at the end of the month was either paid as overtime or flexi time. I normally started at 7 a.m., but I was usually in by 6:40, and we worked to the job, so I could leave at 3:30, but it was often closer to 4. Most of us were the same, but we usually just rounded to an 8-hour day. Suddenly, the projects lost 3 to 4 hours of free overtime per person per week, with an office of around 300 people. That is a crapload of time, and that had to be paid as overtime or banked as flexi as per our contract. 1 or 2 managers suggested that we just adjust our time to the previous hours, but falsifying clocking hours was gross misconduct and a sackable offense. So they went back in their box pretty quickly. HR told us to log our time accurately, and so we did. HR refused to back down because EU law, which we knew that this was rubbish, and so the productivity figures went down, in some cases by over 10%. Costs went up as we had to be credited with all the extra time, and so we all got at least a flexi day per month that we never had before. Thanks, HR. All you needed to do was have a word with Smokey Bob and his and all would be well, but because you wanted to avoid an awkward conversation, we all get extra holidays. Woohoo! Okay, I understand it depends on the country that you're in, but in most of them, if you're not logging all the hours that you're working in the first place, and you're putting in a whole bunch of extra time for a company and not getting anything back for it, you're getting screwed. It's not worth it. When you continue to do it, the companies expect you to do it, and that's just a horrible situation. Our next story today comes to us from Absolutely Zero Life. I didn't give you the right amount of pork? Let me correct that. Let's jump right in. Quick story, but it was absolutely hilarious. I work at a US Western popular counter-serve, laid-back Mexican place. It's most popular in Utah, but has locations in the surrounding states. It's like a Subway for Mexican food. We serve burritos, tacos, enchiladas, salads, quesadillas, and more, all with customizable ingredients. At this place, we have very organized and guideline-set portioning. The meat is the most portioned, with there being regular checks that the guest is not being given too much or too little. So we get really busy at times. This happened last night, and it was really crazy. I was working at the front of the line where the guest selects entree, tortilla, rice, beans, and meat. One guest, a larger woman, comes in and immediately starts complaining how long the line is, loudly. We are getting through the guests as fast as we can, but it is quite slow because it is incredibly busy, and we keep running out of our more popular meats because they have to be grilled and cooked. Karen gets to the front and absolutely starts laying into me about how long the line is. I try to keep the interaction moving in order to keep the line moving, so I take her order. She orders a pork salad. Now, I don't care all that much for the portioning, so I give a little extra if I can get away with it. So I do this for her. "That's not enough meat," Karen snaps. "Oh, I'm sorry, would you like extra meat? That will cost just a bit extra," I reply. "No, I just want regular, but you are being effing stingy. That's not 4 ounces. I know the owner of this place. I know exactly how much it should be." "It is accurate according to our portion standards," I say. We go back and forth for a minute, but I've had enough. She says, "Just get me the correct amount of damn pork." Okay then, I will. I get a scale, and she watches me put the pork in, and it reads 5.9 ounces. I then scoop out some into the trash until it reads exactly 4 ounces. "There you go," I say, "the exact amount of pork." She doesn't even bother finishing her order. She doesn't even ask for the manager. She just flips me off, says "F you," and storms out. Not the most dramatic story, but it was darn funny. This one completely reminds me of a story from a couple of days ago where a guy demanded to get the exact same seats on a canceled flight and then found out that everyone else left who was on the flight got upgraded to first class and he was still stuck in coach. But at least he had the extra legroom because he was in the exact same seats. Now, OP for this story did mention down below in a comment that had the customer been nice to them, they probably would have given them more, no problem. But because they chose to be a complete Karen about it, it was malicious compliance and well deserved. Our next story today comes to us from Federal Ant 9. Ex's divorce lawyer. Send 3 years of complete financials or else. Me, as you wish. Let's jump right in. This happened several years ago when my ex and I were going through a heated divorce and custody battle. While we were married, we had a couple of conversations about how rich people hide their assets to avoid paying taxes. I've never had enough assets to do this, but she somehow got the idea that I was and told her attorney that I was laundering money and hiding income. It was more likely the heat of the moment, as divorce and custody battles often come down to. I couldn't even afford my own attorney, so I represented myself. Her lawyer wasn't a total butt, but he clearly was out to get me, and he talked down to me like I didn't deserve to breathe the same air. One day, I get a letter in the mail from him requesting an updated income declaration form and 3 years of financials. It had a long list of things to include. I own a communications tech company that was in super startup phase back then. Money was already tight. I was trying to get this business off the ground with no financing. I was finishing my MBA with scholarships and loans, so paying for copies and postage or driving this 30 miles to his office meant eating peanut butter and saltines for a week. So I called him to explain my situation. He all but called me a liar and didn't believe I couldn't afford it. I was put off by that, and I said this was taking time away from business I needed to handle. To which he replied, and I'll never forget this, "Well, according to your income declarations, you're not that busy. What do you do all day?" He then said if he didn't get these documents, that he would consider my previous filings as fraudulent, tell the judge, contact the DA, and also alert the state tax agency and the IRS. Probably an empty threat, but I'm no lawyer. eFax is one of the services my company provides, and at this time, it was relatively unknown. So I asked him if he had a fax machine. He said he had a fax scanner copier device, then said what law office doesn't have a fax machine, and I suddenly got an idea. "Okay," I said to him, "I'll put together and fax whatever I can." "Okay, mother effer, you want 3 years of financials, you got it." I scanned to PDF every receipt I could find. McDonald's receipt from 5 years ago? F it, won't hurt to include it. CVS receipt? It's 3 miles long, perfect. They get the $1 off toothpaste coupons too. I downloaded every bank statement, credit card statement, purchase orders from vendors, and every invoice I sent to clients. I printed to PDF the entire 3-year accounting journal, monthly, quarterly, annual balance sheets, cash flow statements, profit and losses. Not only did I PDF 3 years of tax filings, but every single letter I received from the IRS and state tax agency, including the inserts advising me of my rights. It took a while, but I was a few days ahead of the deadline. I made a cover page black background with white lettering. Wherever I could, I included separator pages in all caps in the biggest, boldest font that would fit on the page in landscape. This year's receipts, this year's taxes, etc. I merged everything into a single 150+ page compressed PDF and sent the document using my eFax system. Every hour or so, I received a status email saying the fax failed. Huh? That's weird. Well, they're getting this document, so I changed the system configuration to unlimited retries after failures to keep redialing until it went through. Weird, I was still getting status email failures. I'll delete the failure emails and keep the success one after it eventually goes through, I thought. Problem solved. 2 days later, a lady from his office called and asked me to stop sending the fax. Their fax scanner printer copier had been printing non-stop. It kept getting paper jams, kept running out of ink, and they had to keep shutting it off and back on to print. I explained that her boss told me to send this by the deadline or else he would call the DA and IRS. Since I didn't want a call from the DA or the IRS, I would keep sending until I get a success confirmation. I suggested they just not print until my fax completes, but she didn't like that. She asked me to email the documents, and I told a little white lie that my email wouldn't allow an attachment that big, unless her boss in writing agreed to cancel the request or agree to reimburse me for my costs to print and ship. I said I would continue to fax until they confirm they have received every page. She put me on hold, and the attorney gets on the line. He said forget sending the financials. I said that I would need this in writing, so I kept sending the fax until he sent that to me. He asked me to stop faxing and he would send it in writing, and I said send it in writing first and then I'll stop. Long moment of silence, click. About 20 minutes later, I received an email from his assistant with an attached signed letter in PDF that I no longer needed to provide financials. The letter then threatened to pursue sanctions in court or sue me for interfering with their business. Every time I saw him after that, the lawyer never brought up sanctions, lawsuits, criminal referrals, or financials again. I think the best part of this whole story is the black cover page with white text. Amazing. Also, the big, extreme separator pages, those were really well done as well. OP, I wouldn't want to get on your bad side. Our next story today comes to us from Toe Bob. You can eat at the hotel. Let's jump right in. A long time ago in the late 90s, when I was a young IT consultant, I was sent out of state on an assignment. The sales manager decided to make all of the travel arrangements for me and my coworker. We were to stay at a Holiday Inn type hotel he booked for us. When I asked about daily expenses and a rental car, the sales manager told me that the hotel had a shuttle that would take us to the worksite and we could eat at the hotel restaurant. I tried to argue with him that I'd like to see the town or eat somewhere other than the hotel, but he wouldn't budge. He paid for the flights and the rooms, and we could charge our meals to our room. Anything else would be paid for out of our own pockets. I was young and broke, so I didn't have much of a choice. I settled into the expectation that I would have a boring week of hotel, work, hotel for 5 days. When my coworker and I arrived at the hotel, we were quite surprised to find that it wasn't at all a Holiday Inn type hotel, in spite of the fact that it had inn in the name. It was quite fancy and the rooms were comfortable and spacious. The hotel restaurant, though, was something my lower middle class self had never experienced. This was a restaurant that didn't print prices on the menu. In fact, I couldn't even pronounce half of the items listed. Meals were a set cost regardless of what you ordered. Breakfast was $40 per person, lunches and dinners were $60 per person. Knowing we had no car and no way to expense anything that wasn't charged to the room, my coworker and I dutifully ate 3 meals a day in the hotel restaurant. I had 5 days of filet mignon for breakfast and various gourmet lunches and dinners while the hotel shuttle took us to and from the workplace all week. Now, years later, I'm not even sure I remember the city I was in or the work I was doing, but I remember a week of filet mignon for breakfast and the look in the eyes of the sales manager when he saw his credit card statement. That was a great trip. I can't even begin to think of how much this cost the sales manager. Car to the worksite in the morning, back for lunch, back to the worksite again, back for dinner, and then the same thing 5 days in a row. Wow, lots of money. After reading the comment section down below this story though, I get the idea that some people who travel for work like to take advantage of the expenses and eat at the more expensive places. I'm not sure if that's a normal thing, so I'd love to hear your guys' comments down below. Those of you who have traveled for work, do you live it up in expense at all, or do you go frugal and not try to charge very much? Let me know. Our next story today comes to us from Mad Dan Eccles 1, eating out on expenses. Let's jump right in. I'm not sure if this counts as malicious compliance or merely cunning compliance. A long time ago, I was sent to France for a week to undertake some technical work for a client. The way that expenses worked was that hotel, food, and travel were paid for by me. I then submitted an expense report and receipts to my employer, who would refund my costs. My employer would then submit a copy of the receipts to the client, who would reimburse my employer. Simple-ish. So this particular client had a couple of rules. 1, they would not pay for any alcoholic drinks. I mean, in France, really? And 2, they would not reimburse their own employees for food when working from the office, even if they were in until midnight working on a project. The project manager at the client was a great guy, but applied the rules to the letter. So on my first day out there, he took me aside and said, "OP, I will not approve any receipt that has alcoholic drinks on it. Is that understood? Here's a list of my favorite local restaurants. Have a great stay." I was a little taken aback, but I wanted to have a good time, and I like good food. So I picked a restaurant from the list and went for dinner. When I arrived at the restaurant, I saw the menu. It was a fixed price for entree, main, dessert, and a carafe 500 milliliters of wine. F. But I was hungry, and I'd pay for it out of my own pocket because the menu looked amazing. I got the receipt after the meal, and it simply said, "Le menu, 40 euros, no mention of wine or of what I ate." Second night, tried another restaurant on the list, and the same thing happened. Okay, I think I see a pattern with this list. And so the week went on, and I dined very well, in addition to sampling a lot of local wine. When the final day came and the project was nearly done, we all, myself and the client's project team, fancied going out for lunch. But of course, the client wouldn't pay for its employees' meals. Again, the manager took me to one side and said, "I cannot approve any of my team's expense claims for lunch. However, let's say that you, on behalf of your employer, were to buy us all lunch as a corporate hospitality, and then your employer sent that receipt to me as a project expense, I would be able to approve that. So I did just that, being careful to choose a restaurant from the list naturally. Needless to say that every expense claim got approved, I had a great time, the manager ended up with a very happy team, and the rules were followed to the letter. We don't get very many stories of people who work together for a common good. This manager knew exactly what was going on and worked the system so that their whole team could get a free meal. Pretty well done, I like it. Our next story today comes to us from Master Thief, the college student, and the crappy desk. Let's jump right in. Since it's back to school time, a malicious compliance story from my senior year of college. Backstory: I worked for my college's housing office for 2 summers, mostly for the free summer housing and decent spending money. So after the students had left for the summer at the end of my junior year, I was able to get a set of master keys to check out the dorm room I was assigned to the following year. It was then that I noticed the crappy desk. The top was covered with cigarette burns and it smelled like butt. 2 of the drawers were broken, plus I'm tall, and that model of desk wasn't made for tall people. Now, I had a nicer desk at the time. As I had spent a year living off campus, we were only guaranteed 3 years of on-campus housing. I figured that I could just use my nice desk my senior year with its keyboard tray and ample space and move the crappy desk into storage with its equally broken crappy furniture kin. My housing office boss at the time shrugged and said, "Fine, do whatever." So come move-in time, that's what I did. I moved the crappy desk into storage down the hall. Then, my floor's resident assistant came by for his beginning of year inspection, saw my nice desk, and asked where my university-issued crappy desk was. I told him it was crappy and down the hall in storage. And then he said, "That's against university policy. You gotta keep university furniture in the dorm room, no exceptions." But my boss at the housing office said it was fine, I said. "Well, university policy says otherwise," he said. "But it won't fit," I said. "Not my problem," he said. So after 10 minutes of stewing and considering how I would fit the crappy desk into my room, I took a closer look at the crappy desk, and I saw it was put together with screws. Now, having a handyman dad, I had been sent off to college with a goodly supply of hand tools, and it took 3 hours of work with screwdrivers and pliers on a Sunday night into Monday morning in the floor lounge. The screws had been glued in place and required much force and foul language to remove. But I had successfully disassembled the crappy desk. The panels, bag of screws, and 3 of the drawers I was able to store under the bed in my room. 1 large drawer had to go in the closet on the floor. The next week, the RA returned for another inspection. He asked me where the crappy university-issued desk was. I slid the panels out from under the bed, and before he could say anything, I said, "You said the desk had to be in the room. You did not say how." The RA, to his credit, simply rolled his eyes and told me that I had to reassemble the desk upon move-out or I'd be fined. I told him I would, and when I told my dad the story, he laughed and said he'd bring a drill and screwdriver bits when it came time to move out. And true to my word, I reassembled the crappy desk at the end of the year, the day after I graduated college, though the process gave it a crappy wobble too. I presume it was replaced by the university. I never got a fine or a bill. My nice desk continued to serve me faithfully for the next 15 years, through first jobs and law school, until it too developed a wobble and went to its eternal reward. Moral: when life gives you something crappy and says you have to keep it, break out the tools, break that crap down, and shove it somewhere out of the way. Can we just go back to the description of the top was covered with cigarette burns and it smelled like butt? That pretty much describes every dorm room I've ever seen. In the comments for this one, there were some interesting things in there about people disassembling their desks or the chairs they were given and putting them into the drop ceilings in their rooms because they didn't want to use them. Interesting. Also leaving presents for the next people to find in the ceiling at some point later on. Now, I never went to college myself, but that sounds like it would have been a pretty darn good time. Our next story today comes to us from Evertiro. All expenses paid vacation? Sure thing. Let's jump right in. Ages ago, I was the senior developer for a company that revitalized other companies. Think of it as a sort of mini Shark Tank. We would find small businesses that had a great idea but were struggling, and we'd help them achieve their goals in exchange for a cut. Sometimes this meant providing development or engineering talent to get a product off the ground. Sometimes it meant providing literal capital. Sometimes it meant providing staffing services. Support staff and experienced executives were commonplace needs. We were also a relatively small company, so it wasn't uncommon for our people to have multiple hats. There was one time when I was working as a development lead for one client while acting as interim CTO for another client. It could be a bit chaotic, but it paid pretty well, was a great experience in a wide variety of things I normally wouldn't have had, and was usually pretty fun. So one Friday afternoon, we get a call from a client who was particularly frustrating, a frequent flyer if you will. They seemed to make every 30-second fix into an insurmountable problem. I'm going to be intentionally vague about the specific industry the client was in. It's a tiny industry. Anyone in their industry would be able to identify them just from the industry and city. This particular call comes in early in the afternoon. They recently moved things around, and now none of their printers work. Obviously, it's mission critical. We do some remote troubleshooting, but we can't even get a flicker of life from the device. We spend an hour or so trying to work through what happened before discovering that there's a really good reason it won't work. The cable didn't reach where they moved it to, so it wasn't actually plugged in. Well, that's about as stereotypical as an IT problem can get, right? Just plug it in and you'll be good to go. But management says that's not the solution they want. While it's totally possible to run a Cat5 line to the new location, they really want it wireless since that's the big thing these days. Okay, that's easy too. Most of our comparably sized clients had switched to wireless networking for parts of their offices, so we already had the right procedures in place, deployment scripts set up, etc. All they had to do was plug in the device, which could be very easily acquired at any electronics store, and we could remotely handle everything else in a matter of minutes. But nope, management dictates that we absolutely have to have a person on site in the morning to set it up for them. At this point, it's very late afternoon on a Friday, and everyone but me and my boss, the CEO, had gone home for the day. Boss isn't about to lose his weekend, and crap rolls downhill, so I drew the short straw. We reached out to the client to make sure that they knew what they were asking. They were in Chicago. We were several states away in the Midwest, nearing the end of the day on a Friday. If they wanted me to be there by morning, they'd have to pony up for whatever flight we could arrange at short notice. And there was only one flight that left that night going from our relatively small airport to Chicago, and the only seat available was in first class. Additionally, it would be taking off in just under 2 hours, meaning I wouldn't have time to get home and pack anything if I was going to make the flight. They reiterated that it was absolutely crucial that I be there in the morning, and they would happily pay for whatever flight was necessary. Additionally, I was told that they would have a room pre-booked at the Palmer House. They regularly used a room there for VIPs and such, and I could charge whatever I needed to the room. Further, they said that if I ended up needing to stay longer than a day, they'd reimburse me for any clothing or essentials I had to purchase since it was so incredibly last minute. Okay, I can live with that. I get to the airport 10 minutes before boarding, make it through the vacant airport, past the TSA checkpoint, and to my gate as they're closing the door. Literally the last person on the last flight of the day. I arrive in Chicago and shockingly, there is a company car, effectively a limo, literal black car service before Uber was a thing, waiting for me. He takes me to the hotel as promised, hands me an envelope before pulling away from the curb. The envelope contains a prepaid debit card and a note saying it has $250 on it for incidentals, but please charge anything I can to the room. Sweet. Was expecting it to be a long weekend in grungy clothes, check in, and went to bed. The next morning I show up at their office bright and early. I sit around for half of the morning before anyone shows up to let me in. They then show me the new printer area, which is, as expected, well outside the area of the office which was originally wired for networking, in what was once a break area. I go, yep, that's not gonna work with your old wired hub. Run across the street, literally, door to door was one street apart, to the closest electronics store, pick up their shiny new wireless router, run back to their office, plug it in, then get on the closest computer, run through the 30-second setup, run the script that updates the configs for their quirky, antiquated software so it picks up the new printers in the office, and tell the owner that it's all set up. He gets this sort of confused look on his face and says, "Already?" I respond by pointing out that we did tell them in advance that we could do it remotely if they were willing to actually plug the device in for us, and he finally realizes how silly the call out was. But now, he feels obligated to save face. I'm instructed that I'm to remain in Chicago until the close of business Monday to ensure there are no issues with the new hardware under actual use. Obviously, it'd be fiscally irresponsible to fly me out twice in a week. I asked for clarification. They're instructing me to stay checked into the fairly expensive hotel and keep billing things to my room through Monday night. Yes. What am I supposed to do with the rest of the weekend? Is there anything else at their local office that I can fix while I'm here? No? Go eat a hot dog and play tourist? Just keep my phone handy and make sure I show up at the opening time on Monday? Okay, can do. I go back across the street, pick up a charger for my phone, find a nearby department store and pick up a few changes of cheap clothes, stop by the hotel to drop off my purchases, and spend the rest of the weekend playing tourist. Okay, I did a tiny bit of sightseeing and spent most of the time catching up on sleep, but I did ensure to avail myself of room service for every single meal at their expense, before showing up bright and early Monday morning. I sat in their office for the majority of the workday before the owner came and found me to give me the travel details for my return flight. He even suggested that I'd done a great job. Really? I didn't do anything but plug a device in, and should get a drink before heading to the airport and bill it to the room. As suggested, I went back to the hotel, packed my stuff in my laptop bag, stopped in at the bar for a drink, who knew hotels had $100 plus drinks, and headed to the airport. All told, they shelled out about $1,000 just for the room, probably 2/3 of that in room service fees, several hundred in transportation to and from the airport, not to mention the flights because they didn't want to walk across the street, pick up the easily obtainable piece of hardware, and plug it in. I got a 3.5-day vacation with first class travel, one way anyway, halfway across the country for doing just that. Gee, nope, can't see at all why these people needed help with their business and why you guys were part of this in the first place. The business practices that these guys had were pretty crap. OP did mention in a comment down below, it says, "Unfortunately for me, the client went under about 8 months later. We started to see red flags that their business practices included some less than legal things and pulled out. About a month after we dropped them, they were shut down. I didn't follow the case beyond that point, but I have a little doubt the owner spent some time behind bars." Our next story today comes to us from Chicken Man Sam. Hospice nurse demands I bring exactly what she ordered. Let's jump right in. As a warning, this post does involve a person who is on hospice care. The malicious compliance, however, did not in any way pose a threat to the patient, as I had planned for that. My job is a bit strange. I work for a company that provides equipment, beds, oxygen, wheelchairs, etc. to patients on hospice care. This can be one of two ways: one, in-home with family, or two, in an assisted living facility. This story involves the latter. I got an order today for an emergency O2 setup. This normally includes an O2 concentrator, think specialized air compressor, a couple of backup tanks, a tank cart and pouch, and all of the tubes and equipment for those. I immediately noticed that this order is odd. First, on the order are two of our biggest O2 tanks outside of liquid O2, M60 for those in the medical and gas field. These are large 24-pound tanks of O2 that are reserved usually for high-liter flow patients or those who live in excess of 2 hours from their nearest warehouse. While this on its own isn't odd, the fact that it was relatively close to my warehouse and the concentrator was only a 5-liter one had me questioning. On top of that, the order also had one of our smallest tanks, B-Tank, which are the kind you usually see people carrying in pouches while out walking. Third, there was a tank cart for a third the size of tank, E-Tank, that is our standard but wasn't on this order. And finally, to top it all off, there were no regulators, which are devices that are needed to extract the O2 from the tanks in a controlled manner, and given the order, there should have been two different kinds, as M60s take a different regulator than E or B. Obviously, this order was wrong, and I wanted to make sure I was providing the correct equipment. I figured either the hospice company had a non-nurse input orders, pretty common, which resulted in accidentally getting M60 instead of E-tanks. A standard O2 setup for our company is 2 E-tanks and 1 B-tank, with each concentrator in case of emergency or travel, or they had forgotten to add the regulators and just added the cart out of reflex. I decided to call the hospice nurse, whose number was in the patient notes, and clarify what equipment was needed. "Hi, this is OP with Health Company. I'm calling in regards to your order for patient." "Yes," with the nastiest tone you can imagine. Telling myself she's already had a stressful day, as healthcare is brutal. "I have a few questions regarding the equipment ordered. Some of the equipment is incompatible and or missing." "I know what I ordered. Just hurry up and bring it. Can't you see it's a stat order?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm just trying to ensure that we're providing the correct equipment for the patient. Some of this equipment doesn't seem needed, and others are missing key parts." "I'm a nurse, and you're just an effing delivery driver. You don't know what you're talking about. Do not question my decisions, and just bring what I effing ordered now." "Right away, ma'am. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Now, I may not be a nurse, but I've been doing this for a while. So I go ahead and load up the order, but I also load the regulators that might be needed, as well as the standard O2 tanks just in case. While I was down to maliciously comply, I didn't want to endanger a patient. I figured I'd let the facility staff know, give them the extra equipment, and let the hospice nurse suffer when the facility reported on her incompetence. I get there and screen into the facility where I'm directed to the nurse's station for the patient's unit. I have all the equipment ordered by Nurse Karen on a cart, and I'm going to give her one more chance. When I get to the nurse's station, the facility nurses point me in the direction of the hospice nurse. I stop to talk to her, trying to show her the issue. She immediately shuts me down again and tells me to just do your effing job. She then tells me the room number and walks off. I get to the room and am surprised to see the regional supervisor for the hospice company, who I had met a few times before, as she liked to greet all the new patients when she was in the area. We got to talking, and this is how it went. "Hey OP, are you here to get the patient set up?" "Yep, although there might be an issue with the order." I then wheel in the cart. "Why do you have those tanks? The patient is on 2 liters, they don't need that." I figured it was a mix-up and tried calling Nurse Karen to confirm, but she rudely insisted that I bring this out exactly as she ordered it. She also didn't order any regulators. "What? What if the facility loses power or the concentrator goes down?" I tried explaining, but she just insisted to bring this. "Don't worry though, I've got extras in my truck. Do you want the normal O2 setup?" "Yes, thank you. I'll be sure to look into Nurse Karen's conduct." I did my order, chatted with the facility staff, and left. Didn't see Nurse Karen or Awesome Manager again. I thought that was the end. But it turns out that Awesome Manager called my boss while I was out doing the rest of my orders. Apparently, he wanted to thank me for knowing what I'm doing and letting him know. They started looking into Nurse Karen's other patients and found that she was constantly ordering incorrect equipment, and the other techs were just quietly correcting it for her. Easier than calling, honestly, and what I would have done if my day hadn't been so light. Awesome Manager told my boss that he had let Nurse Karen go and that she would no longer be an issue. Apparently, I had saved the hospice company thousands of dollars in potential malpractice and neglect lawsuits. The nurse in this story reminds me of the one from the lifeguard story we did a couple days ago, where they were going to become a nurse but they were the most entitled person ever. Makes me wonder if they were related. I tip my hat to OP though, because they know their job and they were just looking out for the patient regardless of what the nurse told them to do. Epic. Our next story today comes to us from Sabra 2001. "You want me to waste company money schmoozing the wrong guys? Okay, let's jump right in. A number of years ago, I worked for a recruiting company that serviced a major automotive plant in the US. This was the first of its kind built in the US and had just recently opened. Now, typically for my company, a business manager, owner, administrator would give us hiring orders for new employees. Usually, it's someone in charge who decides to hire new people. With this company, the administration handed the hiring decision to the new hire trainers, then those trainers would give us the order. I loved these trainers. They were deeply religious, family-oriented guys. Both of them adopted children from rough homes while I knew them. Both were extremely kind and welcoming to my new hires I was sending in. which can be rare in an automotive plant. They'd go on missions with their church to help in struggling areas. While I am not religious at all myself, I loved how passionate these guys were, and how it reflected in working alongside them. The plant lowered production and our orders for new hires slowed. My managers started getting on my butt. Hey, go ask Bill and Ted if there's any new hires they need. Take them to dinner and see if you can talk them into more employees. I explained repeatedly to my boss that Bill and Ted do not make hiring decisions. Those decisions come from way over their head, and they just relay it. I was told I am new to this business and don't understand how networking works. Finally, my boss's boss got on my butt when he was in the region for a meeting. I needed to push these guys to make new orders. So I checked my limits for how much I could spend schmoozing clients, and then I took these guys all around town for months. A new steakhouse opened you guys want to try? Bring your wives and let's go. Do you guys want to hit the billiards club for lunch? The whole ticket is on me. Office wants breakfast burritos and coffee delivered? Send your orders in and I'll bring it on my way. At some point, I figured there would be some backlash over the money I was spending. I even found out the max I was allowed to tip and was maxing it out every time to give out more money to the waitresses. I was wrong. The plant cycled up again, and I think my managers believed those new orders came from the money I was spending, and not just typical ebbs and flows of auto manufacturing. Eventually, I left the industry, and these guys moved on to other jobs. We had a blast on the company dime while it lasted. So it sounds like what you're saying is that you took Bill and Ted on an excellent adventure for a few months? Oh my. Now I've got to mention that OP said in the comments down below that they absolutely did tell Bill and Ted about the background of what they were doing. So he says, yep, word for word. Hey guys, they think me taking you to dinner will get more orders in. They refuse to listen to me that this company doesn't work this way, so let's go spend some money. OP says that initially Bill and Ted put up a bit of an argument because they didn't want to waste the company's money, but he convinced them that if they didn't let him take them, that he was going to look bad to his own bosses, and so they relented and had a great time. I thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.